segment to shed more light on how Nigeria's economy has fared in the last 64 years and how Tinubu's reforms will transform Nigerian economy. Is an economist, Dr. Emeka Okengu. You're welcome to Business Express.
Pleasure. Good to be here.
Okay, beautiful. Well, before we get into, talk about the Nigerian economy and how it has fared over a period of, let's say, 64 years on CNG buses, what do you make of this new development?
Well, the CNG system or the CNG program is not as new as people make it out to be. More than 25 years ago, Nigeria had actually established CNG stations. NIPCO had some. I think there were one or two of them that were set up in Warri. It's not less than 20 years old. So it's not really as new as they are being presented to be now. But good development is a good thing. We're working up to that reality. But there are two other demands that you must take into consideration when you are dealing with running programs like CNG. You have both the back-end infrastructure and requirements and then the front end. The back end will be, the maintenance infrastructure. Okay, the front end will be the fuels. You need to run them. Because you need to be refueling, you need to be recharging. If it's electric, you need to be refueling. If it's CNG, if you take off and there's no other station from here, maybe to Kaduna, you might end up taking that car back. So it's also critical that in celebrating...
But I was told that it operates on both gas and petrol. Once the gas, you're out of gas, you can switch to petrol.
Well, if it's hybrid, yes, that's what I'm saying.
Okay.
But even at that, if you're now operate point 1 to point B, it has to be, not point to point, but point to destination.
Okay.
Point I'm trying to make
what
is...
you are saying, availability of the infrastructure, so that...
Yeah, it's very critical. If it's a good development. I'm a progenitor of CNG. We had actually pushed it, when I was consultant to the Nigerian Air Force Holdings, and this was about 15 years ago. We had gone to NMPC to make presentation on CNG. So CNG is nothing new. But in doing this, we must really think it through. And thinking it through means that, those places against distances, where you can get whatever alternative fuels. And if it's cheaper, why would I want to buy petrol when I can use CNG? So that infrastructure has to be there, but it's a good program.
Okay.
Kudos to government at least that have taken it, off the ground.
Okay, on the Nigerian economy, 64 years, what can you tell us or how
it's been a mixture. It's been a mixture of
development over the years.
Oh, yes.
What are the major milestones achieved and the challenges so far?
Okay, well, let's start with the challenges, then we'll go to the milestones. The first challenge is what was bequeathed to us at independence, as our infrastructure for governance. If you want to, look at it, from probably that very holistic perspective, you'll be probably looking at the structure that the Niger Delta, Niger Delta Holding Company left. But be it as it may, we didn't have at independence that infrastructure that could backtrack us, to economic development. What we had was infrastructure that could help us to administer our resources for those who were using it before. What do I mean by this? If you take the trajectory of our transport infrastructure, you find out that a lot of the rail lines were built along, or very close to warehouses. And those warehouses were, being run on what they call the subcontracting model of valorization, if you may, in economics. What does this mean? Most of the goods and services, that were running through our transport systems were heading to the seaports, and, they were supposed to be seaworthy and then heading out to other destinations. Now, we've struggled to be able to get a turn to that, where you now have your raw materials, now heading towards your industries that can be able to now add proper value that can now make it competitive. It's been the greatest challenge we've had, developing a country. But I think by now, or for now, we're beginning to now wake up to that reality that it is no longer about us being raw materials, biggest producer of groundnut. We should also be the biggest producer of vegetable oil. Biggest groundnut of cocoa. We should also be the biggest producer of chocolates. Biggest producer of columbite. We should be able to be the biggest producer of alloys. Now, this is how that second now begins to now get you into that, percentage of the market share that gives you a seat in where they call the politics of international economic relations. But it's work in progress. We are doing well. We are waking up to that reality, that we can no longer be, that raw materials, endless supply place where you just come in and then take everything in its rawest form, take our solid minerals in their rawest form, take our agriculture in its purest form, et al., and including our forestry. You might just want to recall the case of, the rosewood that created some furor, when Nigerian people are going to take it away as raw as it was, and then bringing back very expensive furniture, made from it.
Okay, in terms of industrialization and economic diversification, how far have we come? What can you say today when you look at us and say, okay, you identify to Nigeria?
Well, again, like I said, it's work in progress. But if you want to look at industrialization in the real sense, we haven't yet, we're still, struggling to get on that track. You know why? Because if you want to look at industrialization, it goes from research. The beginning point of industrialization is research, where research begins to meet outputs, and then outputs begin to meet business, and business begins to now meet products. And then you find out that the inputs that get into your industrial process is very, very critical. Otherwise, you're going to be having a GDP, that is actually starting where the GDP of other countries have ended. What do I mean by that? When you bring in resin or polymer or polyester and you're importing it, it's your raw material, but it's finished product to some other person. But if you had the capacity, to be able to now take your petrochemicals waste and then be able to now start producing your resins and polymers, then you'd have, your industrial trajectory would have been a little bit more sustainable. But we are doing well. I mean, I can tell you this for free. We're beginning to wake up to that reality. We're listening Nigeria. First, it started with music. Hitherto, you couldn't go into a place, and hear 3, 4, 5 Nigerian stars. But you can go where young people are staying, and then for 2 hours, all you are listening to, is music made in Nigeria. So in arts and culture, Nollywood has created a niche for us. In our service industry, yes, we've also done well. But we are still lacking in our productive sectors. We still need to, tighten 1 or 2 knots here and there so that we can actually now, begin to proudly say that I'm made in Nigeria. Most of the cars you see written made in Nigeria, 80, 60, 90, sometimes more of those components are not made here really. They just bring them here and assemble them.
Okay,
that's the point I'm trying to make.
Amongst this sector, which amongst them do you think stands out today?
For me, agriculture stands out, aviation stands out. To a large extent, the solid minerals sector is standing out. Where we're struggling with our education sector, I wish we could do better there. We're also
what do you
struggling.
think we need to do, particularly in the education?
Well, we need to rejig what it is we are teaching. We need to move away from the curriculum that prepares you as an administrative officer, and then move into a curriculum, that makes you a skilled person. Okay, that's where I think we need to go in the education subsector. And that's very critical, because when you're talking about this huge bulge of our youth, a lot could have been lost to the attrition of education by so many factors, the climate change factors, insurrections and insurgencies, and all sorts. But those people are still who they are. If you had some skill sets that could empower them to begin to contribute their bit to Nigeria, you'll be very shocked, how intelligent, how brilliant the typical Nigerian young person is. So I think education needs to be tightened. Science and technology failed woefully, I'm sorry to say this, because it would have been at the heart, of rescuing this country. Because everything you want to talk about, every other thing I'm talking about, is based on science, technology, and innovation. And, when the president came and then, changed the name, of that ministry and put innovation, it simply meant that they were supposed to be, leading the charge, to the new Nigeria that should have emerged. A lot of the things we see here, At this age, we shouldn't be seeing JVC cameras in NTA. We should be seeing, Mustafa cameras. We should be seeing Abdul cameras. We should be seeing things that the, NTA Research Institute is producing.
Yes.
We shouldn't be looking at furniture that's coming from China to make up our studios.
Okay. What about the recent reforms by the federal government? How has it helped in shaping the economy? As when you look at the removal of fuel subsidy,
there are three legs to reforms. Leg number one is policy. Leg number two is program. Leg number three is action. Now, the role of government is to do this policy. And a lot of policies, trust me, have had their gains.
But where are we at right now?
Where we are now is there's a determination by government, to take very unpopular, difficult, but very necessary decisions. That's where we are.
So what do we need to do?
Hitherto, we've been very entitled, but people are beginning to wake up to this reality now. That, it's no longer you need to shape up or shape out. So where we are now is that, for me, we are moving towards that reality that we are the masters of our own destiny. Okay, and there won't be a lot of free lunches hanging around anymore.
Okay. Well, what do you think we need to do differently?
What we need to do differently is to rejig, our governance systems, especially as it relates to the relationship between, the federal government and the subnationals. What we need to do is to be able to make certain that we put science and technology at the center of all development programs that we are planning. What we need to do is to make certain that education begins to work for everybody. You can teach people in vernacular. You can teach people in their languages, and then they take this camera we're looking at, and you see a brand new one, and he doesn't speak one word of English. Just like a lot of, the Chinese, people that are working for us and then building these marvels, a lot of them are not lettered in English. So we need to make certain that the education is skewed towards, we need to begin to apply, our infrastructure, our dams, into proper food production systems. We need to move from, season to cycle, production of foods. We don't have to wait. Now everybody says, the price of tomato has come down because we're into tomato season. But if we had a tomato cycle, you would have tomato being the same price from January because you'll be producing. Of course. And this is where science and technology again comes in. And that's why I feel very, very, I'm hard on them, because a lot of the failures, a lot of policy failures we've had has been the failures of our inability to get the right people to do the right thinking around science, technology, and innovation. And
Thank
education,
you very much.
of course.
Thank you very much, Dr. Emeka Okengo. It's always a pleasure having you on the program.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me.